The idea of security and protection has been around since before modern times. For instance, in one of the early civilizations, Mesopotamia, for defense mechanisms, they used walls built around the city to protect the citizens within. This concept developed throughout history, such as in the early 17th century, there were watchmen in Boston who would walk around the city at night to ensure the safety of its citizens. These watchmen were volunteers. It wasn't until 1833 in Pennsylvania that the first official uniformed police department was in America. Law enforcement officials are not only obligated to protect all citizens, but to also ensure that every citizen can exercise their constitutional rights. In the words of Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, there are known knowns. These are things that we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things we know that we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. These are things that we don't know that we don't know. I want to dedicate my life to discovering what the known unknowns are, while working to ensure that the unknown unknowns do not manifest into something that could endanger this great nation and its populace, and threaten each and every citizen's ability to achieve the American dream. Hello, my name is Camie Webb, and I am studying law enforcement and criminal justice, and I hope to one day protect our country and the citizens within it and provide justice to those who have been wronged. One of the most dangerous cities in Texas is West Laco. It's south of Dallas, and it's kind of astonishing, like the rates of crime that they have there. It's 84% higher average crime rate than in Texas, 121% higher than the average crime rate in America. And when in West Laco, you have a 1 in 17 chance of being a victim to a crime. The most occurred crime in West Laco is property crime, which is like robbery, burglaries, and like arson. The second, which is a close second, is violent crime, which is like aggravated assault, murder, and rape. West Laco isn't the only city in the world with these astonishing crime rates. There are thousands of cities that deal with these high crime rates. One of the things I've asked myself when studying these cities is, what's one way we can prevent these crimes from rising, and how can we prevent them from even happening? Well, the answer that I have come up with is crime prevention. That's what I've conducted most of my research on. I want to start with my interviews. I've conducted my interviews with that in mind. I wanted to ask questions, observe like the departments, and see what kind of crime prevention methods they had in place in the city. So the first interview I had was with our SRO here at Frisco, Officer Rispe. I asked her a lot of questions in regards to the career outlook of being in law enforcement. I talked a lot about, I asked her a lot of questions about the pros and cons involved of being in this. She mainly talked about how it's hard to separate your feelings from the field, which is something that has recurred in every interview. There are people that will threaten you, and it's scary for the officers, definitely, because they threaten their family and all their loved ones, but you have to keep in mind that your reaction is really, important. You can't react to that, because if you were to, then you would, you have the chance of having that criminal to just be not convicted, if that makes sense. Just your reaction is a big part of it, if that makes sense. They talk about that a lot in every interview that I've had. That's a question I've asked. Is it hard to separate your emotions from your work? And every time they always say you can't let that get into your police work. You just have to focus on what's right and protecting everybody in the city. I also talked to her about some difficult situations that she's encountered, and there was a ton that she talked about. She's dealt with people that have had troubles and that were violent. She's been in really difficult situations where she thought she would have to use deadly force, and that's really a hard decision to make as a police officer. You have to be able to determine what's the right force to use. It's reasonable force. In the next interview with Chief Bruce across the street, I asked him the same thing about separating your emotions from your work, and he said basically the same thing. You can't let that get into your work. You can't let it impact you. You can't let it impact what you do. And he's been an officer since he's graduated college. He worked at the Allen department before he went to college because it didn't require a degree. And then he went back to college to get his, I believe it was his bachelor's in sociology. And then he went to the Frisco Police Department and they asked him to be chief of police, and he said yes. The next one, I really, really, really want him to be my mentor. I hope to ask him. But he was in crime prevention, and that's whenever I started thinking about crime prevention as one of my research topics. I noticed at the Richardson PD there were different programs that they had, like citizens academies and stuff like that, getting the citizens involved and the community involved, and I thought that was really important to get everybody involved in the city, because you can't make a change without a bunch of people, on your side. So we talked about that. Another thing we talked about was working in this field and how hard it was for him and his family. He talked about how his wife begged him not to work in this field, and even though it was something he loved doing, it was hard for his wife to see, get scared that he wasn't going to come home one day. So he switched jobs to another job. And I thought this was kind of interesting. He told me that he got in a car wreck. There was a car across the street, and the tire came off the car and hit him in the neck. And that's when he was working at his other desk job. And he told his wife, he said, well, if I'm going to get hurt anyway, working at somewhere where I don't want to work, then I might as well just work where I want to, So that really inspired me to just keep following my dreams and not let anybody get in the way of that. The next person I interviewed was Sergeant Perlich at the Richardson Police Department. Now this one was really a part of my research. I asked a lot of questions about crime prevention because I knew I wanted to research that more in depth. One of the things I noticed when I was sitting in the little lobby area waiting to get my interview, there was a little screen that talked about volunteering, and I thought that was really interesting. So I asked about it in my interview. They have people that come in and do really cool things for the police officers. They have a say in who gets hired. They have a say in who gets promoted. And they also have these things where these the citizens go out to streets and they have a radar gun and they see who speeds down those areas. They tally it up. If there's a lot of people, they send officers over there. If not, then they just don't go over there. They also handle small incidences where they if there's a car wreck, they direct traffic. They do a lot for that, and I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a good way to get the community involved. So there's a crime formula. It's kind of interesting. It's opportunity plus ability and motive. Opportunity is the main thing that people focus on whenever we're talking about crime prevention. The idea of crime prevention is to reduce opportunity, because if there's no opportunity to commit the crime, then the crime can't be committed. There's different ways to prevent, to reduce opportunity, such as SEPTED. This is my personal favorite way of preventing crime. It's crime prevention through environmental design, and it's something we don't really notice. I didn't notice it until I was talking with one of the officers. Do any of you guys go to the CT Center? No? Go to CT Center? You know how it brings everybody into this one entrance? That's a way of SEPTED. They try to get everybody in one area, and the entrance is really big, and they have rocks on the side to keep people from walking in the grass and stuff like that. They also have low bushes so you can see inside and see if anything's happening inside. It's surveillance that's really important. There's 4 little categories: natural surveillance, territorial reinforcement, access control, and maintenance. Here's a little picture of what that looks like. There's low fences to show territoriality, little areas where you own the space and people can't walk in. There's also surveillance above, right up here, where if you were to see crimes happening from below, you could report that. There's also little sidewalks where people can neighbors can mingle and stuff. There's lighting. Lighting is very important, so you can obviously see if anything were to happen. That's a really good way to reduce opportunity in crime. And the next thing I want to talk about is focused deterrence. This is actually, I thought this was really interesting. It's kind of like a fear tactic. It's scaring people out of committing crime. So basically, it's telling people the consequences and the punishment of committing a crime. So there's developmental deterrence, which is growing up. whenever you're like a child and through your adolescent years, they talk about the punishment that you get if you were to commit crimes. There's also general and specific deterrence, which is like deterrence towards the general population, so it's telling them not to commit crimes. And there's also specific, where it's targeted at criminals that already have committed crimes, and they've already like suffered the consequences. It's a way to like get them to not commit crimes again. The next thing I want to talk about is problem-oriented policing. This is a more analytical way of preventing crime. They take situations that they've already like dealt with, and they find better ways to like solve the solution, like solve the problem. So there's different like techniques in that. There's this up here, which was created in like 1937, I believe, by Eck and Spellman, which are like, they're both police officers that are like scientists, I guess. I don't know, but they created SARA, which is like scan, analysis, response, and assessment. The assessment is the big part of it, because you have to assess the situation and assess if you dealt with the situation right. There's also the different techniques included random patrol, which is like just randomly going different places and seeing if they're hot spots, which hot spots are places that like crime mainly happens. Like big places would be like in downtown Dallas, that's a hot spot, places like that. And also focus deterrence, which I talked about last slide. The next thing I want to talk about, which is the last thing I want to talk about, is reporting crimes. Not many crimes are reported because victims of the crimes don't feel like they were victims of a crime. These crimes that aren't reported are called the dark figure of crime, which is kind of a spooky name for it, but yeah, there's a lot of people that are scared to tell the police about the crimes that they've been involved in, or they don't think they were victims of it. One of the ways that they document this is through the NCVS, or the National Crime Victimization Survey. You guys might have gotten one before in the mail. I have one here if you guys want to look at it. I'll like pass it around or something here. But yeah, it's like it's like a way to like target like the type of victims that criminals target, if that makes sense. Yeah, they like try to generalize the type of victim that criminals target. The next thing is the NIRBRS, which is National Incident-Based Reporting System, which I think is an interesting name. It goes along with the Uniform Crime Reports that the FBI put in. This right here, the NIRBRS, I like calling it that, but that's what law enforcement agencies turn into the FBI to put in the Uniform Crime Report, which as you can see, not a lot of crimes are reported compared to the crimes that are reported in this NCVS. The NCVS isn't like supposed to be like a thing where you tell them specific incidents. It can be anonymous, and most of it is anonymous. People don't want to tell, like, they don't want the other person to get in trouble, or they just don't want to talk about it. The NCVS is just a way to figure out how much crime is actually happening in certain areas and the victims that are targeted. And I want to lead on to my original work idea and my final product idea, which is they both involve crime prevention and these different methods I just talked about. My goal is to do for my original works, to do a research paper over all of these different methods, maybe even more that I research. And also for my final product, I hope to like make my own crime prevention program in like certain areas and see if they work, if they're cost effective, and how they work in those areas. And that's my goal. And I hope that they actually work, and I hope it can make a difference in the world. As do most officers, they wish that they can change the environment they work in, change the community, and make it a better place for people to live. And that's what I think the purpose is, and I think that's what my mission in life is to change people's lives.